Hey, Mike. Mike, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
So since I made you the host, it stopped the recording. So make sure we go back and you have to start the record on your end.
You got it, buddy. I just wanted, without being the host, I can't do it on YouTube.
My God, that's cool. No problem. Just letting you know that since I gave that up, I just can't record it. So I had to stop it to make you the host. So you just have to pick it up on your end.
I'm going to make you co-host so you can take care of adding people on along with me.
Cool.
All right, I just made you the co-host.
Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Mike Robinson, and today I'm joined with Dana Fletcher, my colleague. We're going to present to you a workshop on resume writing and cover letter writing so that we all can upscale our resume and do what we need to do to make sure that we're presenting a polished resume to our prospective employers. I'm going to ask that everybody mute themselves at this time. Everybody mute themselves so that there's no interruptions. There will be a Q&A period so that when we get to that point of the presentation, make sure you're jotting down all your questions so that when we come to the Q&A portion of the presentation, all of your questions lined up, and Dana and I can go through all of the questions that you may have. We will provide you with our contact information so that in the event that you need any follow-up coaching, with your resume or some assistance with your practice interviews or some tips and insights on job search strategies. Those are the types of free services that we provide. And so I'm going to let my colleague Dana introduce himself. And after his introduction, we'll go into our presentation for today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dana Fletcher, and I'm a career coach with Temple's LNPWI. And so I have the pleasure of working with Mr. Michael Robinson on a daily basis. And what I do is I help people who are looking for assistance with creating resumes, help with improving their job skills, techniques, and searches, as well as helping people get ready for prepping for their job interviews and helping them get assistance with things like clothes and things that they need them like that. It's a pleasure to be here today with you.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to get set up for our presentation and we'll get started. Now, our contact information is on the screen so that in the event that you need to get a hold of Dana or myself for any of those services that I mentioned earlier, resume writing, practice interview, job search strategies, etc. Our contact information is on the screen. Write it down so that in the event that you need any type of follow-up on those services, you can reach out to Dana and myself to make an appointment, and we'll be happy to work with you. Also, we'd like you to go to our LinkedIn page. If you have a LinkedIn account, go to our LinkedIn page after the presentation and submit a recommendation on both of our Facebook pages, on our LinkedIn pages, letting us know your thoughts about today's presentation. So if today's presentation benefited you well, go on our page and please submit a recommendation so that we can keep a log and running tab on how effective and impactful and practical our presentations are. And if there's some areas that we need to focus more on, feel free to email us and let us know, hey, Mike, hey, Dana, I like what you said about such and such. Could you spend a little bit more time on that maybe the next go round? and we'd love to make those kinds of adjustments. So with that said, let's get started. Now, when we think about putting together a great resume, you got to get straight to the point. You got to be concise, you got to be precise, and you got to be very succinct. Be to the point. Don't beat around the bush. And your resume is like a marketing brochure. It tells the employer the very best of who you are. So get straight to the point when you're outlining your greatest duties, your greatest responsibilities, your greatest accomplishments. Make sure you get straight to the point. Use bullet points to highlight your most relevant accomplishments and experiences. Bullet points limits what you're going to say. It helps you to get straight to the point. Tailor your resume to each job you're responding to. If you're only using one resume to apply for every job that you're applying to, you're going about your job search the wrong way. You have to tailor your resume for each position that you're applying to. That makes your resume more potent and more impactful. And then for those of us who've been in the workforce for a number of years, I've been working since 16 years of age. I'm 60 years old. I'm only going to go back 10, 15 years in my resume. People in my category who's been working maybe more than a decade, you only want to go back about 10, 15 years. Now, if in your career history, if you're applying for a job, and if in your career history, the job that's related to the position that you're applying to, if that job on your resume is beyond 10 or 15 years, pull that job to the very front of your resume. Even though you're pulling it out of time order, you're going to pull it out of time order to put it in front of all of your work experiences so that the employer can see that you have relevant experience as it relates to the job, and then continue 10, 15 years going back in your resume.
Can I record this?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Right. Mike, also, you have to share your screen so we can see the presentation.
It's not on the share screen?
No, not yet.
But on my end it was. I apologize. Let me try that over. I apologize, everyone. All right.
I'd also like to remind everyone at this time, if you can please mute your microphones, we will be happy to allow you to have you can be able to speak at the end during the question and answer. If you have a question or something you want, if you could please put it and type it into the chat for now, that would be best. Thank you.
Can you see that now, Dana?
Yes, you just have to make it full screen, that's all.
You got it, buddy.
There we go.
There we go. It's on you, Dana. You want me to go?
Okay, right. So what we're talking about now is that, we're talking about how to make your resume stand out a bit. One of the things I always tell people is if you list in your resume just everything you've done, I did this, I do this, I do this. If 199 other people apply for the same position, how does that employer know to separate you from everyone else? So you never want to just do a laundry list of things that you've done because you're not able to stand out. So you want to make sure that when you're doing your resume, you make it like a highlight. It's almost like your greatest hits. You want to mention the things that you've done that distinguish you, that show your professionalism, that sells your value, that makes it so much to the point that when it's time for them to come up with their short list of people they want to bring in, that your name pops out at the front. And this is especially important now because the way things are going with virtual interviews and things like that, the biggest key to getting you to that next step is having a great resume. It's not like before you walk in someone's office, you talk with them, they kind of get a feel of you, they like you a bit. Hey, listen, why don't we come in for the interview? This is a lot of times it's strictly based upon what you have on that piece of paper. And one of the ways that you really make that pop is making sure you sell what you accomplish to what you've done. Next slide.
Now, when we think about tips for putting together a great resume, look for keywords in the job description to include possibly on the resume. Because some applicant systems that you submit your resume to when you're submitting your information on a company website, some applicant systems have computers that read words on your resume, and if they don't see certain keywords and phrases, they skip over that resume until they find resumes that contains those keywords and phrases. So if you see some phrases or if you see some keywords in a job posting that really speak to your experience, that really capsulize what it is that you're trying to convey in your resume, use those words. Now, review your resume so that you can compare it to other sample resumes that are in your industry. And the way you can do that is, let's say if you're in sales, go to Google, type in sales, examples of sales resumes, and it will show you a litany of resumes in that category. Compare your resumes against what's out there to see how in sync your resume might be with other great resumes that are out there that are samples for your use. Include only the most relevant experience and the most important information on your resume. Your resume isn't to include every single minute detail of every single thing you've done. It is your highlight reel, like Dana mentioned. It's your highlight reel. When you watch a football game, or when you watch a baseball game or a basketball game, they show you the best touchdown, the best home run, the best slam dunk or three-pointer. They show you the highlight of the game. Your resume is your highlight reel. It's the very best of your work experience, the very best of your duties, the very best of your accomplishments. So when you're putting the resume together, think in the mindset of what is my highlight reel? What was the best of my duties, the best of my experience, and most importantly, what was the best of my accomplishments?
So here's some more tips from Indeed that we can use. Make sure you use active language or power words, meaning that the language that you use when you talk about the things that you've done or the things you're responsible for, the impact will differ depending upon the kind of words that you use. And so a lot of times people have a tendency to just list it, they have a tendency to just list what they did. But even when they use that, they use verbs that don't really show the power and strength of what their contribution was. So in order to really make sure that what you're putting jumps off the paper, use active words. Use words, for example, if you're a leader, about how you're organizing people, you're directing people, you're leading people. Use those powerful words that have an emotional contact or content. So when the person that's reading it sees it, it resonates with them. Make sure you call attention to your important achievements. A lot of times people downplay, again, what it is that they do. Oh, I only did this. I only did that. But think about the things that you do that not everybody else did. Maybe you trained somebody. Maybe you were the person who was elected to be the supervisor if in the case of an emergency and the regular supervisor or site manager had to leave. Those are things that are important achievements because not everybody did that. If you're in a customer service role, maybe you were the designated go-to person when you had a difficult customer. Those are accomplishments. Those are things that not everybody can say that they did. Some people were just rank and file, here's what you have to do. So make sure that you're highlighting those things. And it says also decide whether you need unique resumes for different jobs, meaning that one of the things we always say is skill sets transfer, right? So even if your job title says one thing, you're going to have aspects of that job that you can connect to the job that you're applying for. So make sure you connect those things. And then you may realize that, maybe I have experience as a home health care provider, but I can also go to this other role. So I'm going to tailor this resume a little bit, meaning that if you're applying for a customer service position, then you don't need to mention the fact that you were giving people medications and helping to clothe them and feed them, because that's not what they're going to ask you to do. So on your resume, you would focus on what? the skills that you did as a home healthcare aide that would enable this employer to think, you know what, this person could also do this job for me in a call center. So focus on the customer relations, focus on your oral communication. So that's what we mean when we're talking about targeting your resume, making it unique. Don't use the same resume for every person because the jobs will be slightly different. And you'll find that if you don't target it and make it unique, you won't get the same amount of results and buzz as you did if you actually made it unique. Next slide.
Your resume is your brand. It's your marketing brochure. Look at it like that. And it should include enough content to cover important career information, highlighting the very best of what you've done, the very best of your duties. It's your highlight reel. It should never exceed 2 pages unless you're in higher education or some type of education role where multi-pages of your resume is acceptable. But in most industries, in nonprofit and in corporate, most of those industries expect a 2-page resume max. The exception is if you're in higher ed, a multiple page resume is certainly acceptable.
So we've talked about this earlier, and again, think of your resume like a highlight reel, correct? So, and also think of it like a marketing tool, meaning that you want people to see your value again, right? And I mentioned it earlier, and I'll say it again, you want it to stand out, correct? So if you look at, for example, Michael Jordan or LeBron James's highlight reel, they're not showing them shooting free throws. They're showing them the best of what they did, the best dunks, the best transition layup. So make sure your resume, again, puts you in that light, showing the best of what you did, because you never know. You may touch on a pain point that company kind of knows that they have, but didn't realize how urgent it was until you reminded them that your skill set can solve that problem. So always emphasize the best of what you did.
Your resume is a part of a communication chain. It may include submission of your resume along with an application. It may include submission of your resume along with an application and your cover letter. Or it may just require, just the resume. But it is a part of a communication chain that is important for you to present your very best document, because in most cases, that resume is going to be the first point of contact that an employer has with you. Before they even meet you, they typically will receive your resume and will review it on its own merit to determine, is this somebody I want to call in for an interview? So your resume must be well crafted. You must give it some good thought on what content you're going to include. And remember, you want to be straight to the point, and you want to create a sizzle effect. You want to create a buzz for that person that's reading it so that you motivate them to call you for an interview.
So again, we talked about this earlier. Think about your resume like a branding tool, right? So these are the things that you really want it to do. And again, I want to focus on the sells you to the employer. Because again, employers are looking, they have a specific kind of applicant in mind, meaning they're looking for a certain skill set. So you want to show that person, I'm the person that you're looking for. You want to show the hiring committee that because of my resume, you can see what I've accomplished. You can see how I'm different than the other applicants. You can see the value that I'm bringing to your company. You can see that I have detailed experience. You can see what I've done. That means I'm the person that you're looking for. And this is where a lot of times, honestly, people, they fall short sometimes because they focus so much on talking about what I did. They don't talk about the best of what they did. And they don't frame it in the light that it gives the true value to that employer. And if that happens, the reality of it is that you didn't get the opportunity that you wanted, but also that company didn't end up hiring the right person. So make sure you treat your resume like it is a branding tool.
Now, let's get into the anatomy of a resume. What is the anatomy of a resume? Well, a resume includes certain components that are going to be common from one resume to the next. Now, the formatting of it may be different, but most resumes are going to contain what Dana and I are about to go through. All right, now, first and foremost, you want to make sure that your heading is correct. Some of you change cell phone numbers like people change socks. If you're one of those kinds of people, you better make sure that your phone number and email are up to date on all of the resumes that you're sending out there, because competition is tight these days. And if I gotta call you and find out that your phone's disconnected because you've had 3 brand new phone numbers since submitting your resume, I'm not gonna do a Dick Tracy detective move and try to track you down. I'm moving on to the next person, because there's a lot of talent out here competing for that same job. And if I don't have to do Dick Tracy and track people down and do detective work to try to find, your correct information, I'm just going to move on and make life easier on myself to the next candidate. So make sure your name, your address, your phone number, and your email contact information are correct. All right. Now, include an accomplishment section on your resume so that you can brag about yourself in this section. In this section, you're highlighting major accomplishments that are related to the job you're applying to. Major accomplishments and major experiences go into this section so that as a reader of your resume, as the hiring manager looking at your resume, I automatically see in that accomplishment section what relevant skills, what relevant accomplishments and experiences you have that are related to the job that you're applying to. I immediately see it. Then next on your resume is the section for your employment history. Start with your most recent employment first and work your way backwards. You always start with your most current position and work your way backwards. Now, when you're including your employment history, always include the start and end date. If you don't know the exact month, then give me the year you started and the year you ended. But it's always appropriate to include the month and the year you started with that employer and the month and the year that you ended your employment. Include the employer's name, city, and state, because some companies have multi-locations across the country. You want to indicate the name of the company and the city and state for which you worked for. You don't have to include the full address, just the name of the company, the city and state are appropriate. And then under duties and responsibilities and accomplishment, only include the very best of the duties you handled, the very best of the responsibilities you were tasked with, and only include the very best of the accomplishments. Remember, it's your highlight reel. It's not every single thing you've done. It's your highlight reel, the very best. And then under the education section, start with your highest level of education first and work your way down. So for instance, if you're a high school graduate, but you participated in an apprentice program for a labor union, then your apprentice program would go first, then your high school education. If you graduated with an associate's degree, bachelor's degree, master's degree, etc., you start with your highest degree and work your way back. Now, if you have a college degree, you don't have to include your high school information anymore because that's passé now. But if your high school education is your highest, then that's what you start with. But if you have a college degree, you don't have to include your high school information on the resume. All right. Now, under technical skills, that might be a section you want to include if you're computer literate. Some of you are very savvy when it comes to understanding software and computer operation. So if you have special skills in that area, list what software you're familiar with working in an exceptional manner. List what computers you're used to working with. Those are some things that would go into that section. Now, I included a section called Other. You could call it membership. You could call it volunteer activities. You could call it leadership. and include those respective things in that particular section. Because some of you may not have a title of leadership on your job, but you're very active in your community. You're a coach. You're president of your local neighborhood association. And you may want to include those things because maybe some of that might have some relevancy to the job. So include that under a section that would enable you to list that. All right, so that's the basic anatomy of a resume.
Actually, Mike, can you go back to that for 1 second before we continue? So I always want to say that this is one of the most important parts of the presentation, because I know a lot of people, when they hear the word resume, they kind of break out in hives. They get stressed out, their hands start shaking. I don't know about this. And a lot of it's because we haven't been properly taught how to do it, right? So the main thing is we're trying to demystify the process, right? You don't have to be a genius, a millionaire, Einstein to do this. It's just learning the process. So if you're a person who's kind of been adverse to this, the reason why this slide is so great is we're showing you exactly how to come across with it. And as a reminder, if you need assistance with it, we're more than happy to follow up with you and give you a one-on-one presentation. So if you feel like I understand this, but I'm not sure how to do it, at the end, we'll remind you and show you how you can get in touch with us to help you to walk through this process. Next slide, Mike.
Yep. Give me 1 quick second, Dana. It froze on me, buddy.
I understand that happens sometimes.
Give me
So
1
again, so the main thing is if you haven't learned it before, there's nobody, it's not necessarily a mark on anyone. It's just, we're going to get you past it now. So things we should and should not do on the resume, right? Always check your grammar and your spelling. Because remember, we said this is a marketing tool, right? I don't know if you guys are as old as I am, but I remember a long time ago, there was a guy named Jay Leno on the Tonight Show. And one of the features he used to do was they would take ads that were in the local newspapers and magazines, and they would put them up and show the misspellings and mistakes and the misusage of words that sound similar but have different meanings, and they would laugh at it. So if I'm using the wrong spelling, if I'm using the wrong pronoun, then that's going to reflect on my professionalism. And as an employer, I'm going to think, well, wait a minute, this resume is for you to handle your business. If you're not, dotting your I's and crossing your T's with your business, how's it going to look when you have to handle my business? So that's why it's important. Always go back and check your grammar, check your spelling, make sure you don't have any simple mistakes in there. You want to proofread your document. In addition to proofreading it, you want to get somebody else to take a look at it. Mike Robinson and I, we do this for a living, but if I'm sending a resume out, I'll send it to Mike. I'll send it to other people that I know. Why? Because one of the things your mind will do is it'll play a trick on you sometimes, and you'll see words that aren't there. And you won't see words that are there. Why? Because you know what you were trying to say. So give it to somebody else who doesn't have that perspective, and they may tell you, hey, listen, you used the wrong pronoun here, or you left the word out, or you had the same word in twice. Another trick is use bullet points. Your average, let's say, hiring manager, when they're looking at resumes, remember, they may be looking at hundreds of resumes. So if they see bullet points look easier to read. If you have it in paragraphs, the person may mentally, without even realizing, be like, man, this is a paragraph, I gotta go through all this. But if you make it in bullet points, it seems easier for them to access the information. Again, you want to specify your dates of employment. You want to list all your credentials, things that we talked about earlier. Things you don't want to do. Do not put your references on your resume. All you have to do is, if you put references, available upon request. That's enough. If they want to know your references, they will ask you, trust me. So there's no need to put people's phone numbers and names on that paper. Don't list personal information which is not relevant to your job application. They don't need to know your age. They don't need to know your marital status. They don't need to know your religion. They don't need to know your orientation. All those things actually can cause you a problem, because some of that information, they don't even, they can't ask you about it. But if you open the door, then you kind of open the door for them. So personal information like your social security number, that kind of stuff, your bank account number, they don't need to do that. You don't need to put your photo in. A very important thing for especially younger or artistic people, use standard fonts. If that employer or that company, that committee has to really work to read your font, they're going to just move to the next resume. So remember, the standard is Times New Roman, size 12. And the last part is you need to not include inaccurate, or I'll add fabricated information. If you add something which is not true, thinking it looks better, but you know it's wrong, one of the things that people forget about is there's a small clause in that contract. If you willingly submit incorrect information, they can terminate you for that. So if you're talking about you have a degree that you don't have, certificates that you don't have, experience that you don't have, and that employer finds out, they can terminate your contract immediately based on that clause. So don't put inaccurate or incorrect information. If it's an issue of accuracy, just take the time again through proofreading and double checking, you'll catch that. But please do yourself a favor, do not put in incorrect or false information trying, to better your situation, because it'll backfire on you.
There are 3 types of resumes that exist. There's a chronological resume, there's a functional resume, and then there's the combination of the two, which is a hybrid, which includes the best of the chronological format and the best of the functional. Those are the 3 categories of resumes that you have to choose from in terms of what is the best format for me. And you have to determine that for yourself. And you can go on the internet and type in chronological resume, functional resume, to see a variety of choices and formats that may catch your eye, that may appeal to you, and you may decide, I want to go with this version. And so check the internet to see what samples are out there to get an idea of how to format it. But there are 3 types of resumes: chronological, functional, and the hybrid, which combines the chronological and the functional. Now, let's talk about the chronological. The chronological emphasizes time in the workplace. It emphasizes your time. Chronos is where we get the word chronology, which deals with time. It's the time you've been in the workplace. And remember, we start with your most current employment and work your way backwards. This is what a chronological resume looks like. You'll see it begins April 2001 to current. They're currently still working there. And then the job before that was with Liner Lifts, project engineer. They started there in 2000, ended in 2001, and that's when they started at KRM. Education section, a section on interests, what their personal interests are: mountaineering, skiing, snowboarding, and special awards. Eagle Scout, that's a big time award. Dana?
All right, so the next one is the functional, right? Now, the functional is basically good for someone who has a gap in their employment. And that gap in employment could be for several reasons. And again, you don't have to mention what those reasons are. But if someone, let's say, for example, had a health issue, if someone had to take care of a family member, if someone was incarcerated and came back, maybe they lost their job and it took them a while to find or secure other employment. This is something which would be good for that person. And the reason why is because it focuses on the specific job skills that you have. So if you're a college graduate or someone who's in high school and maybe you don't have that experience, right? So all those cases, using the format Mr. Robinson just showed us is not to your best advantage because you're focusing on something which is a weakness. So for those of you who have that situation, you want to focus on functional because now it's playing to your strength. And the strength is, excuse me, what it is you can do. What skills do you bring to the table? What abilities, what skill sets do I have that the employer can see this and say, you know what, this is the kind of person that we're looking for. So if you look at this format here for functional, after their objective, you see they have their profile and their skill summary. And you see how much space that takes up at the top. Because what we're trying to show this person is the potential that you have, the skills that you have, because kind of give you a little bit of insight into an employer, right? A lot of times with the employer, like also the coaches, I coach football as well. We have a mentality that, you know what? If you give me the right materials, we can produce the finished product. So if you're a younger person or a person who, like I said, who has that experience, who has those skills and the right attitude, that employer may say, you know what, by the time we put our stamp on that person, we put them through our training, this is exactly the person that we're looking for. But in order to get that across, you have to show them your skill set. So you see, for their skill summary, they made it long. For their profile, they mentioned a lot of their qualities and things that are there so they can see the potential this person has. And then after that, they mention the work experience and the history that they have. Mike?
Now, the chronological resume, back when I was a young buck in my 20s, 30s, the most popular format of resume was the chronological. Now, fast forward to 2021, I would probably be accurate to say the most popular format of resume today that's probably proliferating the marketplace is the hybrid. It's a combination of the chronological and the functional. It combines the best of both worlds. That is probably the most popular resume that's used today. But you have the three options to choose from. Now, a hybrid resume, the giveaway is that you'll see a skills summary section. That's the dead giveaway of a functional resume. But you'll also see on this resume, it goes into job history. So it includes the chronological, which is the time in the workplace, and it includes a functional, which is emphasis on skills, and that's a hybrid resume. Now, I'm not a fan of a job objective. I never include a job objective on my resume because I'm tailoring my resume to each job so that I don't have to mention that because my resume is geared, it's being written towards each job that I'm applying to. I'm tailoring my resume. In some of your minds, you're thinking, oh, that's a lot of work. Oh, I got to change my, it's really not. You might be just tweaking your resume here and there. And in some cases, you're leaving some stuff off because it's not even relevant to the job you're applying to. So in some cases, it's actually going to save you some time because all you got to do is shave some things off your resume. So remember, you're tailoring the resume for each position. Dana, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I want to add that one of the other things that I really appreciate about the hybrid is for those of you who want to switch careers and go into a different field, that's another great way of showing the experience that you have as well as the skill set you have. So in my personal experience, I used to be an ESL teacher. So when I got into this line of work, I had to convince people that, you know what, even though this wasn't something I did before, I can use my skills as an ESL teacher to make that transition. So by showing people the experience and the skills, that's a very powerful way to show them that I have the skills you need for this job, even though it's not necessarily in the field I had, that I had been in previously. So now we're going to talk about your cover letter, right? I like to describe the cover letter as like the trailer, right? So if the resume is the movie, the feature film, your cover letter is the trailer. And the same way with the movie, if you go to a movie and you see the trailer and you're really not impressed by the trailer, you're most likely not want to go and see the movie. So you want to think of it the same way, that your objective with this cover letter is not just something I have to do because they asked me for it. You want to build a fan in that person before they see your resume. So what our objective to do here is we want this hiring manager, we want this hiring committee to be on our side before they see the resume because of what they see in our cover letter. So how we do go about doing that is visually, we want the same appearance in our cover letter as we have in our resume. So the font should be the same, the size should be the same, the length should be appropriately the same. You want to have it consistent in terms of information wise. And again, our purpose is we want to create that excitement. So when they see the resume, they're looking forward to it.
And also with the cover letter, please keep this in mind. Your cover letter should not have every single thing in it that your resume contains. What's the purpose of submitting the cover letter if it's everything that's contained in the resume? Use cover letter to go into greater detail on the key points and the key objective areas that that employer is recruiting for. For instance, Dana and I are about to explain the most radical, most impactful, impressive cover letter format that you can present to an employer. In some cases, this format that Dana and I are about to present to you will be more powerful than your resume. It's called the T cover letter. The T cover letter format. Look at the screen. It's called the T cover letter because it looks like a T in terms of the format. Here's the line going down in the T, and here's the line going across. Now, the way it works is an employer can immediately see your skills, education that are directly aligned with what they're looking for. It's immediate. Let me explain. On the cover letter, on this format of cover letter, that's way different from any others that you've probably been submitting. This allows you to outline all of the key strengths that you possess under their job requirements. So let's say you read a job description and there's 12 job requirements in that job description that they're looking for. And out of that 12, let's say you meet 7 out of the 12 job requirements. So in the cover letter, you're going to include those 7 items. Forget about the ones that you don't have experience or qualifications in, because the name of the game is emphasis on what you bring to the table. So if out of 12 things, out of 12 job description requirements they're looking for, if you only meet 7, then you're going to list under this section called job requirements, those 7 key areas that you stack up with. And then on the opposite side, under my qualifications, in a bullet format, you're going to include how you meet that experience. So for instance, the job requirement says they want a bachelor's degree, right? You may have a bachelor's and master's degree. So you're going to include that right next to the degree requirement. They want experience monitoring and recording data. You're going to list, I have 7 years of that experience in a bullet format, working with diverse individuals with diverse barriers to employment, helping them overcome those obstacles, right? So that's why this format of cover letter is super powerful, because it lines up apples to apples, oranges to oranges, how you stack up with what they're looking for. And it's immediate. Dana, any thoughts?
I would say that, again, it's the impact. And if nothing else, it's because if, again, we talked about earlier, you want to stand out, right? If everybody else is sending a similar kind of cover letter and yours physically, or not physically, it like visually looks different, you've already stood out. So if you've got 200 cover letters and there are only 5 or 6 that look like this, you've already made an impression. And then in addition to that, with the information you added, you stood out even more. So again, if you're trying to be what they say in the advertising is disruptive, meaning trying to draw attention to yourself and away from others, if you can use this format, it's definitely to your advantage. So we're gonna talk about now email communication, right? So what is it we should do in our email follow-ups when we're dealing with people, right? So when we want to confirm appointments, it's always good, for example, someone sends you an email, we want to confirm that appointment, go back to them, let them know, thank them for their time, and confirm that we're going to meet at this day or that time. We also, if you need additional documents, maybe for example, like if you're applying for a position and they require you to have clearances, whether you deal with children in the school or if you are in a medical field and you have to show some of your certificates, whether it is for nursing, first aid, or whatever, you would also have email communication for that. And also, if you want to thank that person, that committee, for their time, their consideration for the interview, remember, not everybody is going to be considered, right? Not everybody is going to get the same weight with that employer. So the fact that they considered you, the fact that they're looking at your candidacy, you want to thank them for that, give them that human touch. Now, when you're sending the email, make sure that you have a professional email, okay? Now, again, we're talking about branding ourselves. You don't want to have this great professional brand and all of a sudden your email is irunthestreets215.com. That email address completely undid everything that I just talked about in my resume and everything I did in my cover letter. So if you want to have that email, does that mean you have to get rid of it? No, it doesn't. It just means you should have a professional email account, and what you do privately is your business. But when you're sending professional email communications about job interviews, resumes, following up, use something which has like your name in it or something that they can reasonably identify you from, and try to stay away from gimmicky email addresses, things like that, because again, it may cause that employer, especially if they're conservative, to look at you like, who am I about to offer? Who am I about to interview? You know what I mean? So make sure you keep it professional. Want to add anything to that, Mike?
Yes, and make sure that if you're a person who doesn't check your email all the time, like Dana and I are in the business of constant communication with people, so we have to check our emails every day, multiple times in one day. You might be a person who only checks your email once a week. If you're in job search mode, you have to check your email at least 3 times a day, once in the morning, once in the afternoon, once in the evening. That way you know you're not missing communication. Establish an online presence on LinkedIn. Everybody that's in job search mode, regardless of your profession, should have a LinkedIn account. It shows that you're professionally aware of professional social media that's geared for professionals. And that's what LinkedIn is. It's not for posting what you ate for dinner. It's not for posting the new gear that you just bought at Saks Fifth Avenue. It's not to post, happy birthday announcements. It's for professional job seekers and for professionals who are currently working. So it's for job seekers that are looking for work, and it's for currently employed individuals to network with one another. 70% of recruiters are on LinkedIn. I hope you heard that. 70% of recruiters are on LinkedIn. So you want to be where the recruiters are. All right. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, if you have any of those accounts, as a human resource professional, we're newsy. So if I schedule you for an interview, prior to you coming in, I'm going on social media to see what pops up with your name. I'm going on social media to see what your social media content looks like. And if you have some crazy stuff that's out there on social media, that kind of stuff, in some cases, have prevented people from getting employed. And it could be a stumbling block to you getting employed, especially if you're cursing folk out, if you're making some outlandish remarks, if you're highly politicized on certain issues. Those kinds of things can be stumbling blocks. So what am I saying? If you have a social media presence on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and you have a vague suspicion that you have some stuff on there that might not be suitable for a job seeker to have on their website that could be held against you, then temporarily shut down your social media sites until you find a job. Because if you got some crazy stuff out there, that stuff is searchable and it can possibly go against you.
So if I kind of add on to that real quick before we get to this,
Absolutely.
and even for those of us who have jobs currently, the same thing still applies. So looking at the topic and not who or what side of the issue they're on, we all can think about in the last couple of months people who've done things and then or said things on their social media and it got out and people said, "What? Let's find out where this person works and get them fired because of what they said or did." Excuse me. So even if you have a job currently, remember what we put on social media, people are going to look at it. So just make sure your social media is responsible and you don't cost yourself an opportunity or a position because of it. Once you've done all of that, we want to thank the employer, right? We want to follow up with them and thank them for giving us the time and the opportunity to be considered for this position. So we want to observe proper business etiquettes when we're doing this. We want to make sure also that we're just we want to distinguish ourselves. We want them to see us because not everyone's going to follow up with them, right? Not everyone's going to take the time to send them a message. And the beauty of this is that if the employer is on the fence between you and another person, you going the extra mile may cause them to remember you first and you get that opportunity, right? And it's also a good way to show your communication skills, especially if you put on your skill set for your resume that you're good at communication. This shows what you're saying is true because you followed up again, taking the extra mile to communicate your gratitude to them so that way they understand that you're a person who appreciates the opportunity. And you never know where that will take you. You want to think to that, Mike?
Absolutely. Now, Dana and I are reposting our contact information on the screen so that you can jot it down in case you didn't do it earlier. And if you have follow-up questions, if you need help with your job search, if you need job referrals, that kind of thing, reach out to Dana and myself, and we'd be happy to work with you. And we especially give high priority from anyone from the North Philadelphia area surrounding Temple University main campus, or maybe you live in the Temple University Hospital community. We give highest priority to those individuals, but anybody that's on today's presentation, we'd be happy to serve you. Now, that's the workshop presentation. And what I'd like to do now is to open up for any questions and answers. So if you have a question for Dana and I, unmute yourselves and ask the questions that you've been jotting it down along the way. By a show of hands or by a sign of applause, was this helpful? How many thought information
very
was
helpful.
All right.
Yes, it was very helpful.
Super helpful.
Excellent. The best I've heard so far. Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Yeah. Best I've heard so far.
You've helped me out.
It was very helpful, clear, concise.
Yes.
It was great.
Don't forget to go to our LinkedIn pages and submit a recommendation on our LinkedIn pages and let us know what you thought was great about today's presentation. So if you have questions,
Mike.
fire away.
Mike, before we open it up, there are a couple of questions in the chat that we want to add real quick, and after that, we'll let everyone kind of
Sure,
go from
absolutely.
there. So one person, hold on, all right, so Miss Kamaya, she asked a question about should the requirements and qualifications mirror each other, even if it creates a huge space.
Gonzalez, can you mute yourself for a minute? Thank you.
All right, so listen, I'm going to mute everybody real quick, and then unless we call you, that way we can make sure everybody can be heard clearly. So, Mike, do you understand that question? Do you want her to elaborate?
Can you elaborate, Kamia?
Sure. Good morning, guys. The question was when you created that cover letter, how you had the T formula. I noticed that, like, when you list on one side the requirements, when you list the qualifications, it created a huge gap. is that something that we should worry about when we create that, or is that just something that will naturally happen?
Now, I couldn't hear you because you faded out. What part
Oh,
are
great.
you, T cover letter?
So on the T cover letter, can you hear me a little better?
Yes, I can.
So on the T cover letter that you recommended, when we're listing the requirements and the qualifications, when it's mimicking itself, I noticed that it created like a huge gap on the requirement side. Is that something that we should focus on?
No, because what you're going to do, you're going to do it in a bullet format, and that way the bullets are going to line up. So under requirements, let's say if there's 12 requirements, but you only meet 7 out of the 12, then you're going to bullet those 7 requirements that you stack up well against. And then for each of those bullets, to the right of it will be a bullet with the explanation of how you meet up with that qualification.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Great
I have
question.
another question. Lucas Van Balen asked, the workshop say use simple formatting like no columns, etc. So software can read it. So it seems like their concern is that if you use columns, if the company or the hiring agency uses software to read the resume, they won't be able to read it. So what do you say about that?
You know, software will vary one software package to the next. The key is to submit a resume that includes accurate information, detailed information, and the very best information about your experience, your skills, and your accomplishments. Always include accomplishments because that's what's going to set you apart. Now, if a company has a specific software that's sensitive to format reading of a resume, they're typically going to ask you to submit your resume in a plain text document. Now, what that does is this. Many people create their resume in a Word document. In
Yeah.
a text document, you would open up your Word document, and then you would save as, and then save it not in Word, but then save it in, it gives you the option when you press save as, it's going to give you the option of, do you want to save it in Word? Do you want to save it in a PDF? Do you want to save it in a plain text? If the job is requiring a plain text, click on plain text and then go back into your resume to see what that plain text format looks like. Because what plain text does, it removes bullet points, it removes indentations, it removes certain spacing. And so you're going to have to go back into the plain text document to make sure everything is lined up with the appropriate information the way you want it looking. Because if you just save your Word document in a plain text and leave it like that, you may submit a resume that's kind of jumbled up. So remember, if you save it in plain text, save it, then go back into it as a plain text document, open it up, and then if you see stuff kind of like jumbled up, just, reformat everything in the plain text document and save it in your revised version. And that way you're meeting the requirements that the company wants you to submit the resume in. I hope I explained that.
And another common question I see, which is, yes, we will make available today a PDF version of the slides as well as an audio recording from today's session. So if you're interested in that, so if you just email us, and again, we'll put our presentation in. If you email me specifically and let me know that's what you would like, then I will make sure I get that out to you. No problem.
Q&A, questions.
Right.
Anyone have any questions about the information we shared today? You guys gave us a
I
great.
do.
Yeah.
I'm
I'm sorry to cut you off. While I was listening to, I think it was from Dana, why using a photo is not necessary for a resume. I received a few resumes like this before. So I'm wondering why a photo isn't exactly necessary so that I can relay this to our participants.
Well, Mike, you want to try and take a shot at this first, and I'll come back afterwards?
Yeah, in some cases, a photo could prejudice a person before they even meet you. For instance, I got a gray beard. If I submit a resume with my picture on it with a gray beard, in some cases, if an employer is looking for maybe a younger candidate, because you don't know the mind of an employer, they may see Mike Robinson and say, oh, I don't want to deal with him because he's probably going to want a certain level of money. He's a little older. I want somebody who's younger and more energetic. And so, you know, by submitting a photo, I might prejudice the reviewer before even having a chance to present, you know, on my background and experience. So you don't want to submit a photograph on a resume. A resume is not a document that you want to include your photograph.
I agree. Thank you.
Excuse me.
Julia has her hand up, so you want to go from there?
Sonny, we'll get right next to you next.
All right, okay,
Julia is had her hand up before you, Sonny. And
okay.
We'll come to you next. Go ahead.
Hey everybody. Hey everybody. I just had a question with regards to like the either if you have jobs or other volunteer experience that you want to include on your resume. What do you do if like that job in and of itself, like either in its title, gives away some sort of like protected identity status, right? Like if you're working with like a particular, you know, like if it's yeah, like if you're working with people who are incarcerated, or if you're working with people who are LGBTQ or whatever, like if that is in your resume, like does that, if you're including that like in your volunteer or other experience, you know, how best to present that so that it doesn't have any influence on the hiring process in a negative way?
If it's work that's relevant to the job that you're applying to. So if I work for an agency that works with individuals who may be homosexual, and I have direct experience working in that agency that's related to the job that I'm applying to. Maybe I was the accountant for that agency that served that population. Maybe I was the sales representative for that agency, but I'm applying for a job in a different, you know, industry, but same type of position. As long as the position is relevant, it doesn't matter about the organization. It's the skills, experience, accomplishment, and education that I'm most concerned with. And the same would go if I'm working in a religious environment, but I'm applying to a secular job in corporate America. Maybe the skills that I gain volunteering or even working for a church or a ministry might be the exact skills that that company in corporate America is looking for. So you want to emphasize the skills, accomplishment, education that's relevant to the job that you're applying to. It's not so much where you're coming from, and in some cases that can play, you know, to your advantage, because maybe you work for a super well-known agency in your city, in your state, or nationwide that's very recognizable, that has a very positive reputation in the general public. So even though it may be, you know, very specific in terms of the service or the type of clients it serves, if it has that kind of prestige in the marketplace, that can go to your advantage. So just put the emphasis on the skill sets that you bring to the table, and I think everything else will fall in place. Dana, any thoughts on that?
No, I agree 100%. I was going to say the same thing. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to Sonny next, and then Sonny after that. John Gonzalez, you had your hand up. So we're going to go Sonny and then to John, okay?
All right. I want to know, now I pressed recording for this program, and the comments people make I found very interesting. I enjoyed listening to it and whatever. But now that I recorded, how do I get to see what's recorded? I'm not familiar with this computer thing.
Reach out to us after the fact, and
Okay.
try to help you through that.
All right.
All right, John Gonzalez. John, you're next.
Yeah, you had your hand raised, so you're unmuted. You can go. Did you have a question or did you hit that by accident?
Anyone else have a question or comment that they'd like to pose?
What happened to my phone?
I have another question if Mr.
Yep.
Gonzalez doesn't. When you're writing, you mentioned when writing a resume that you should list, you don't have to list your diploma, your high school diploma, if you have a degree. Was that also in replacement for trades as well? So
No.
like, okay.
No. Unless that rule only applies if you have a college degree. So if you only have high school education in combination with certificates, apprenticeship programs, and training programs, always include high school along with those other types of credentials. But once you earn the college degree, there's no need to include high school on the resume anymore.
Should the trade be listed first before the high school diploma, or should the high
Yes.
school diploma be listed first?
In any experience, training, and skill beyond high school will always go first, and then the high school information will follow. Tina,
What?
Rose,
Thank you for that.
Ralph Sharma. Yep.
Oh, I said that. Well, what I wanted to know is at what point in time the recruiter can ask for like bank information and IDs and stuff like that.
That's typically going to be asked if you're the candidate that they want to extend a job offer to. So it's good to have that information handy, your driver's license, if you have one, or your state issued ID. It's important to have access to your social security card, not just knowing the number, but the actual card itself, because they're going to want documentation of it. Also, marriage certificates for benefits. They want a copy of that in some cases.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
And again, to kind of reemphasize what Michael was saying, that comes at the end. You're not going to give them that in the very beginning. Once they've decided, for example, if it's a company and they've made you the offer, then that goes to HR to make sure that they have your file started. If it's an agency, then again, that means typically they want you to work for them, and they need that information to give to the company they're going to send you to. But in the very beginning, you wouldn't send that in the very beginning because there's no guarantee that you're going to get the job yet. So you don't give out that kind of information unless it's pretty much until you understand between the two of you that you've reached an agreement. Would you agree with that, Mike?
Yes,
Mike?
I agree.
Yes, I did too. Thanks. Thanks a lot.
You're very
I
welcome.
enjoy
Very well.
the session.
Thank you. We did have one other question, Michael. Ms. Floran, she asked if we could, she asked about for the LinkedIn page, where they could find us. Are we on temple.edu or where are we, our pages?
All right, I'm going to type in my LinkedIn page on the chat. So give me a minute and I'll include it in the chat. And Dana, you can do this. I'll do it for Dana as well. So give me a minute. Dana, you could go to the next question and I'll include our contact in the chat for our LinkedIn pages.
I got it. So Matthew Brophy, he has a question. He said that resumes and cover letters are a huge part of the hiring process that come before or during the interview phase. He said, however, I believe we don't emphasize or prepare job seekers enough in the soft skills or communication part of going after a job. I mean, I always stress to my students to never be afraid to reach out to hiring managers to express your interest in the position. I call it hustle. I call it the hustle part of job seeking, whether you're emailing them, calling them, or even doing a pop-in. And that's a good point, which is, you can't be afraid to put yourself out there. And, one of the famous quotes, I think it was Michael Jordan said it, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So if you're interested in something, then create that cover letter, create that resume, and then go forward and apply. the worst thing they can tell you is no. So it doesn't hurt, and also it gives you experience in targeting your resume. It gives you experience in targeting your cover letter. It gives you experience in preparing for the job. So as you're preparing on those things, and as Matt said, you work on your soft skills, your communication, and going after it. It's only going to make you a better at what you do. So never look at an experience like, oh, it was a waste of time. No matter what part of the process you engaged in, it's always practice. And what you'll look back on later and realize is that those practice exercises you did, the times that you tried and it didn't succeed, it prepared you and got you ready for the opportunity that you were able to take advantage of. Why? Because you had the experience in the process. So never look at it like, you know, it's just something I'm doing because I have to. You're always going to get something out of each resume you tailor,
Yeah.
out of each cover letter you do, and each experience that you have. And that's a great statement. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Mhm.
In the chat, you'll see our LinkedIn contact information. And if you actually click on it in the chat, it'll take you to our LinkedIn page. And we'd like you to submit a recommendation on your thoughts about today's workshop. A lot of you said that you got a lot out of it. Let us know. Put it on our LinkedIn pages. And remember, if you're an agency, maybe you work with clients that are job seekers, and you'd like Dana and I to do a Zoom presentation for your job seekers that you serve, feel free to reach out to us so that we can set up some dates and times where we can facilitate a customized workshop for the clients that you work with. Any other questions
Wait,
about?
can I jump in real quick also?
Absolutely.
And also,
Yeah.
as a reminder that if you are a job seeker, or again, if you have clients who need help with this, you don't have to do this by yourself, right? So you have our contact information. Reach out to me, let me know. And I'm very happy to schedule a personalized individual one-on-one session with you or one of the job seekers you're working with to help you with your resume. Because sometimes we may sit in a presentation and it sounds really good. And then when I read the information, I read the PDF later, I go back, I listen to the audio, but then when I try to do it on my own, there's a little bit of a disconnect. So we don't want you to feel like we gave you the information, you're on your own. So when you're finished with this, if you still want that extra help, if you want to have that safety net with you, reach out, call me, email me. I'll be more than happy to set up an appointment with you and we can get this done together, okay? So again, if you need any assistance, we will put our information back up, reach out. I'm more than happy to work with you.
Can you please put your information back up one more time?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
No,
And I
very
thank you
welcome.
guys so much. It was very informative. Thank you.
Absolutely.
You're very welcome. And I appreciate you asking for us to put that back up again. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you soon.
There it is. Thank you. I got it. Great. Great job, guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you coming.
Okay, I'm Bill, and I had my hand up, but you never called me.
Okay, I know what it was because
Hello?
yeah, because your name came up as John Gonzalez. That's why we said John. So, but no problem, Bill. You can ask away. Your
Okay.
turn.
Now, I'm pretty much like on the hobby side because of my age and the year and the time I was brought up into the workforce. But I always have like the hybrid, and it's like combined with it. It's not a good thing, but it's all the first I get to the area that I'm familiar with and I feel that I can do, and then I list up all my experiences, and then it more like then I use like the T in it combined together. Is that a wrong approach, or should I just stick to one, the hybrid or the T?
Well, to kind of answer your question, when you're saying the T, that's actually for a cover letter, which is slightly different than what we would do for the resume. The other thing also is sometimes it's not even so much the information you have, it's how it's presented and what you have from there. So in order to really be able to answer your question, why don't you reach out to me, set up an appointment, and then I can actually look at your resume and we can see it now, because it's kind of abstract what you're saying. So until I can actually physically see it and say, okay, here's what you have, here's where we need to go, I can't give you the full answer to your question. So again, I put my information up, and just make sure you contact me, reach out, and then we can set up that appointment and we can get you squared away.
Okay. Well, I have you on record, but I got to get you.
Well, tell you what, I'll retype my information in the chat so that way if anyone needs it, they can.
Yeah. I wanted to ask the question, if possible.
Sure, go ahead.
On a cover letter, I mean, I've been sending out like two pages of cover letter. How long a cover letter should be about?
1 page.
1 page? Okay.
1 page.
All right. Thank you.
Other questions? Any other comments, questions? The Q&A session is open to any additional questions. Well, with that said, Lee, you have a question, Lee?
Yes, I have a question.
All right, buddy.
Searching for a job, and a lot of the resumes, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, great. That resumes that I've submitted, they are not submitted directly to the employer. It seems like I have to go to a platform like Indeed or Glassdoor or something like that. How often do the job recruiters or the HR person, how does that work? Do they send those resumes to the job, or does the job check those sources, like going to Indeed or Glassdoor or whatever those platforms are that I submitted my resume to?
I always advise people, and Dana, I'd like you to chime in on this. I always advise people, when you see a job posted on LinkedIn, Monster, Career Builder, etc., company, and they're posting on those sites, I always recommend to people go to the company's website and apply directly through their website.
Okay.
Now, LinkedIn and those third-party websites like LinkedIn, Career Builder, Monster, etc., they typically will send that information on to the employer. But sometimes what can happen is, between the time that those companies post on LinkedIn, Career Builder, Monster, etc., and the time that they fill the position, there can be a gap. And in some cases, by the time the applications that were submitted on those third-party websites get to the company has already reviewed candidates that applied directly on their website first. And so it's always ideal, at least in my experience.
I agree. No, I agree with you.
To have people apply directly on the employer's website and not through these third parties. They'll get the third party information, but it might not be expedited as quickly comparison to you just going straight to the company's website and applying there.
Okay, thank you.
Dana, any additional thoughts on that?
No, I would say the same thing. And I would also say, and Michael, if you know different, correct me, some companies even will give preference to people who apply directly as opposed to on the third-party sites, because sometimes what they get on the third-party sites aren't as good as what they get from the direct hires as well. So I would say, listen, in general, right, cut out the middleman. If I don't need a middleman, then I'm not going to do it. So what Mike was saying is very important. So you may just use Indeed and LinkedIn and these things to that's what Indeed, but LinkedIn and Monster to say, oh, there's a job at this place. Then go straight to that site and find out exactly where it is. So they can help you by saving you doing the footwork of finding the job. Once you found it, just go straight to the source.
Yes. Because I applied for a job on Indeed, and then when I got to the final part, they asked me to do it in an assessment. And that's what I found problematic, because they were saying that whatever you score that you get with the assessment, it would become part of your profile. So if you failed it, they would list that you failed, or if you was proficient or superior in your skills in assessment, or you scored that high, they would make that part of your profile along with your resume. So I didn't do that because I did some research on that, and people were complaining that they wanted to do a retest and they couldn't retest until like 6 weeks later or 6 months later. So.
But then also, I mean, but again, that's part of their vetting process. Like, for example, I don't remember ever applying to a job directly and having to take those aptitudes. That's something that they're doing to show the HR person that, you know what, we're vetting. So for the money you're paying us, here's what we're doing to give you qualified people.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I do got some good news. What I did, I used a friend. I've been using my friends. So I do have an interview for this coming Monday. So I just went directly through friends, asking them about jobs, and they sort of pointed me in the right direction. Send your resume to this person. So that have proven to be really, really helpful.
Awesome. Any additional questions from the audience? Well, with that said, Dana and I will make sure that you're included on future communication regarding workshops. We do workshops every other Friday on different workforce topics, job strategies, interview techniques, etc. And so we'll keep you on our mailing list, our email mailing list, so that we'll email you out communication on future events. Before I ask Dana to conclude, I just want to thank each and every agency that's represented today and each and every person that's represented today. We thank you for your participation, and we really appreciate your positive response to the content. And we look forward to your feedback on our LinkedIn pages. Dana?
Yeah, I'd like to thank everyone also. I think this is one of the largest number of attendees we've had so far. So the session went great and went longer, not because the content, but because you participated and you were engaged and you asked great questions and you stayed. And, we thank you for what you brought to the session, because sessions can go very well. And sometimes, they go not over the top, but they get taken to that level of, great because of what the audience brings. So I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule, bringing your energy and your questions and your passion to what we were able to provide today. And I hope everyone found it beneficial. And again, if you want that follow-up, you have our information. You saw it on the screen. You have it in the chat. Please make sure you follow up with us. Remember, no matter where you are in your process, you're not alone. You don't have to do this alone. We're more than willing to help you and get you to where you need to go. So please just reach out, let us know what we need to do to help, and we're here to help.
Okay.
And also, if you want from today, if you want the PowerPoints, if you want the videos, and again, if you're with a group and you want to take that PowerPoint and the audio and share it throughout the members in your group, that's no problem. We're more than happy to provide you with that. Again, we'll give you the PowerPoint, and you can share that audio either with yourself, people as well as people within your organization. That's all good. We're happy to provide that with you. But again, if you want that, just reach out to me by email at the end of the session, and I'll make sure you get it.
Take care, everyone.